Well, welcome everybody. Today we're here to talk with Tarek Albaba. We're so grateful you're here, Tarek, about his really important film, 36 Seconds. Just out of curiosity, can you raise your hand either in reality or your real hand or your virtual hand, just to let us know if you've had a chance to watch the film yet? Beautiful, beautiful. Um, a really important film about three young Muslim people. As Mehdi Hassan said, he knows those people. I feel like in my work in NewGround, I know those people too. Remarkable humans who really just want to bring good things into the world. Um, and we know that the preconceptions that we carry, that many Americans carry because of the media that we are exposed to, and many other things, um, can keep us from really seeing everyone as human. And we know that this is true very much in our society in relation to the way the Muslim community is viewed. And this is coming back right now and hurting people in really serious ways. And so it's a very important thing for us to confront right now. So really grateful you're here. Grateful for those of you who also joined us for Unbroken for Yom HaShoah. Um, I don't know that there's anybody that's new to New Ground here, so I'm not going to do that part of the spiel. But um, really, stories are at the heart of our work. Um, we know that one of the ways in to helping people grow perspectives that they haven't had before is to connect deeply with a story of humans, of a human being who matters, who comes to matter to you. And so we've been reading books, we've been seeing films, and again, we're just grateful, Tarek, for your being here with us. And I'm going to pass it on to Aziza to give an official intro.
Thank you, Andrea, and welcome everyone. I'm really glad you made time to join us again. It's barely been a week, and I'm grateful to see you, especially right now. I think being able to see each other more frequently is essential, especially as we face so many different challenges, and we need to be able to understand more deeply what pains each other, and to understand more deeply what's at the heart of things for each other. And so that's why, to me, 36 seconds is so essential. I first got to know Dr. Suzanne Barakat over the last couple of years, and she's taught me a lot about grounding myself. I've been in the most intense meetings, and if you watch the film, like she really, even in the moments when she needs to say something that's hard, she grounds, she breathes, and she calls us all back into the pause and the breathe, and then she says what she needs to say. And so, if there's anything I want to make sure that we're doing today, it's to make sure that we are doing just that. We're grounding, we're breathing, and we're saying what needs to be said. And so, without further ado, I'm grateful that Tarek Albaba is with us today. He's based in Los Angeles. He's a filmmaker, and he's been featured on major flat platforms like National Geographic, History, Discovery, and Apple TV Plus. His independent work focuses on creating stories that explore human rights, historical injustices, and social issues. His feature documentary about a debut, 36 Seconds, Portrait of a Hate Crime, premiered at DOC NYC in 2023, where it won the Subject Matter Award. You can read so much more about him, but we're just really grateful that he's spending time and willing to let us explore this film further. So welcome, Tarek.
Thank you
Um,
so much for having me. It's an honor.
You're very welcome. So what we have in mind is very similar to past Zoom programs with Newground, is we'll have a chance to ask Tarek some questions at any moment in time. If you feel compelled, like you have a question, please chat the question directly to Michal, and she'll make sure that Andrea and I get them. And we'll try to weave in as many as we can. So again, please make sure you are channeling your questions to Michal. So we'll start off with some of the questions. We'll weave yours in, and then after the hour of conversation with Tarek, he's going to be signing off, and all of you are welcome to join us in breakout rooms. We're going to make sure that we're breaking up by affinity groups just so that we can dive in deeper into the subject matter. So we'll have Jews with a Jewish facilitator, Muslim with a Muslim facilitator, and if you have another faith background, we'll also have a facilitator for you too, because the idea is we need to understand. So without giving too much more into the logistics, let's dive right in. Tarek, can you give us some background about how this story first, like why you decided to do this story, how it came about, and what that journey has been like for you?
Well, I grew up in North Carolina, and I had experienced what a lot of folks experience in the South, direct or indirect racism, punches left and right. Regarding my background, I'm half Lebanese, half Palestinian, Arab American, Muslim American. Um, and I was a senior in high school when September 11th happened, so things were certainly ratcheted up to the point where, I was, in soccer games, you would hear the opposing side calling me a terrorist and to go back home. And I got jumped after a game and no one really came to our defense. And so I have many stories of that nature. So essentially, when the murders happened, I was already here in California pursuing my career. And I wasn't shocked. I was concerned because we had family members that lived in Raleigh and Chapel Hill. I knew something like this was inevitable. And so our immediate gut reaction was, is everybody okay? So we started a group chat. We got on Facebook Messenger. We're like just trying to figure out because, we were getting information was piecemealed. It's like, oh, there's a shooting. Oh, it's three Muslim students. Okay, well, who are these students, right? And so in that panic, we identified that our family was safe, but my cousin, Haytham, actually knew the victims and was texting Dia Bettercat throughout the day. And just so you know where Dia's headspace was, he was texting Haytham about advice on how to raise money for Syrian dental relief program. So Haytham was devastated, and in the direct aftermath, I was kind of following the story like so many people around the world were. And I was really taken by, the Better Cat and Abu Salah's grace and intelligence and just how they were handling the situation, being very clear about who their children were, who their siblings were, and what they wanted. They wanted it to be investigated properly, and they wanted it to be classified as a hate crime because they knew. And they were very, very hurt by what transpired. The press release from the police and how the media was kind of spinning it. And they had to actually work pretty hard to correct that narrative. It didn't just happen overnight. The community got their back, and they themselves had to really advocate and make sure that they were kind of doing the press tour and pressure our government and the DOJ. And so basically, I saw my cousin a couple months later, and he was like, "Hey, they still got this story wrong." And the families are really struggling, and they're trying to navigate the justice system. And you work in Hollywood, maybe there's something that you could do. Maybe there's a project you could do. And so for me, it was like being called up for duty. I'm like, yes, I have the skill set. Yes, this story, even like cinematically, checks all the boxes, right? Um, and so I thought, okay, well, let me start developing an outline and how I would approach it because obviously, like so many news organizations at that time were involved, from Al Jazeera to NBC to CNN. I mean, Dr. Suzanne was on Anderson Cooper, so obviously doing something very newsy is not something I'm interested in. I wanted to do something more personal, and because of the fact that I'm from the community, not just the Muslim community, but also growing up in North Carolina, I felt like there was a lot of value there for me to be the author of this story. And so later that year, after I had developed what my approach would be, I like put together a pitch video. I sent it to the family members. I got a warm introduction through my cousin, and they were, you know, very sweet and allowed me to kind of conduct the first round of interviews. And what I tried to do is, in filmmaking, you try to be really strategic in terms of when you're on the ground. And so we knew the 1 year anniversary was coming up in 2016 in February. It was going to be a big moment. It was going to be chaotic. There was going to be lots of events, but it was also going to be really emotionally draining for the families. And selfishly, as a filmmaker, that's kind of what you want, right? Like you want that rawness, you want that energy. And so we planned a 7-day shoot around the 1 year anniversary, and you see a lot of that footage in the documentary. A lot of it made the final cut. So that was kind of our way into it, and I just felt, it was an important story to tell. I was the right person to tell it, and it was certainly an emotional journey. It was a difficult journey. I wanted to meet this really high bar of premium documentary storytelling, and I felt the weight of our entire community on my shoulders. And not that like they weren't like barking at me, they weren't like demanding it be done a certain way. It was like this invisible thing. And I wanted it, I felt like this story deserved to be on a Netflix or a HBO or a PBS. And so, it took a lot of resources, took a lot of time, and it didn't even get to a trial or anything in the court system for over 4 years. So, you had to be patient, and you had, as soon as certain things came to light, you had to kind of do a mop up of interviews to make sense of what actually came out. So it was a long journey. It took us 8 years, but who's counting?
Well, I'm so grateful that you were able to see it all the way through to the end. Yeah, a lot of memories came back for me as you were talking. Remember memories of this time, and Aziz and I, were really moved to see how the community coming together and showing up for them was part of the story, and this kind of correct this like little by little, like really fleshing out the actual narrative of what happened, was so important. And communities, we know there's so much mis and disinformation right now, and there aren't often opportunities to set the record in the direction that it needs to go in. Um, so now that you've done that, we're really interested in hearing a little bit about what kind of impact you hope the film, what's the impact it's had so far, and as you move forward, what's the impact you hope it to have?
I could answer that by giving like a specific, just like a taste, if you will, of like what has happened at some of our screenings. So I was at Boston College for one of our screenings, and there was a young man from rural upstate New York. And after the film, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I grew up in this small town, and so many of my family members and friends, voted for Trump during his first run for president. And at the time, they felt there was nothing wrong with the rhetoric that he was using. And after watching the film, he was like, I just really had no idea, and I can't wait to share this with my parents and some of my friends from my neighborhood, because I now understand the direct correlation of how this impacted your community, how this could how this kind of rhetoric can turn people to violence, and just how hurtful it is. So thank you." And I'm like, "You are the exact reason we made this film." So that's just one example, but also as a community, and obviously, you know, um, my Jewish brothers and sisters have been through so much throughout history, and World War II, post World War II, and even still to this day. But I have to say, as a Muslim American, Arab American, Palestinian American, my whole life we felt like a punching bag, like whether it was in Chuck Norris films or on television or in newspapers, Palestinian, like people didn't even know where Palestine was. It's like, oh, what was it, Pakistan? And if they did know anything about Palestine, it was associated with terrorism. So it's just like I think you have to look at the context of the times. So the murders happened in 2015. Okay, well, let's rewind a little bit. When President Obama got elected, there was a surge in Islamophobia, right? The whole birthright thing, and then, rewind a little bit more, 9/11, rewind a little bit, so we've been kind of this punching bag, and this negative, and racist rhetoric has just always been accepted. And a big part of that is we had lack of representation. There wasn't a Mo Amer series, on Netflix. There weren't films like this out. And so, people just kind of got away with it. And I felt like the American public almost could align with these are the bad guys. Oh, the Middle East is a wreck. They don't treat women right. This is the Islam is evil. Like it was just like almost accepted, and we were the victims. And so I think what you saw with this film and the community and how they rallied behind these families, it's like this case study of enough's enough. And if Dia Houston Rezan, as sweet and as amazing and as intelligent, and I mean their lives were like this, they would have been elected officials by now or like started nonprofits. If they could be taken away from us so violently, none of us are safe. None of our kids are safe. In fact, I was at Sundance Film Festival this year, and there was a younger Muslim filmmaker who came up to me. He said, "Look, I'm a little ashamed to admit this, but when the murders happened in 2015, I went and got a gun." Like, that's a pretty powerful statement. It's like, I didn't feel safe in my own home. I felt like somebody was going to break in and execute my wife. And I was just, what do you say to that? So.
Yeah, it really takes your breath away. And the despair kind of starts to sink in too about like where are we really? And um I think to Mother Emanuel and Pittsburgh and Christchurch and Buffalo and how they all connected to this fear of the other. It's like they're all interconnected, even if they feel and they stand on their own, but they really do. And there's manifestos. And for instance, like in Pittsburgh, Jews were advocating for refugee resettlement of immigrants. And all of these, and then the shooter came in and referenced that, and like the like one, like it's extremism feeds, and it's almost like it's a thing that like not just grows, but is something that we all are impacted by. Communities are impacted by. Like if anything, the film showed how deeply like 36 seconds just radically changed the lives of these families. And but then all of us who are watching it so closely and the fear exactly to the example that you just shared. And it really leaves its impacts. And so in this era of more feeling more danger, where people and where we might feel more suspicious of each other, where do you where do you how do you reflect on this moment?
Oh gosh. Um, I don't know. It's hard because, there's obviously some anger and resentment, but you start to realize that you don't want to waste your energy. And, I've got two young kids, and I don't want to be that upset, and I don't want to be consumed with the media and the latest thing that some radical has done, and that influence my relationship with my children in that moment. And you just have to be more mindful of that. So what do you do? Do you try to convince folks who are living in some alternate universe and think that this kind of behavior is okay, or do we do what we're doing right now and try to work with folks to amplify our collective voices, um, and not really waste our energy? I don't want to completely give up on these folks, but like I feel like I've wasted a lot of my time and energy on that, and maybe we just need to, in this moment, do exactly what we're doing right now and try to amplify one another and try to, support each other, whether it's a nonprofit or a new book that's coming out or a documentary, And we may just have that one person in the audience, just like at the Boston College screening, who is willing to go and share, whatever it is, this piece of art or, this new candidate, something that really impacted them, and let's see where it goes.
Yeah, well said.
So that go, goes perfectly into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is last night we were sharing a discussion between an Israeli and a Palestinian, something that they had had a hard conversation, and we used it as a springboard. And one of the people talked about her own ideological unconscious. That's how she referred to it, and
Mm.
wanting to, like, understanding that she needed to move out of of the unconscious ideologies that are in there. And I feel like your person at BC, and one of the people sitting on my left hand last night, who kept saying, I want, I think this is what happens, but maybe I'm wrong. People who are willing to look at the received narratives that they have, and actually interrogate them, let them be potentially wrong. There's so many ways that we get wrapped up in our own narratives, inside of our own narratives, that we can't see one another in our full dimensional humanity, right? Because we have a picture. I think you were talking about this earlier, that Palestinians are seen as terrorists. That is an association that we've often been taught to make in American culture, and often in Jewish culture as well. Um, so, I say this, we're seeing that there are serious consequences when we're not asking those questions. So I guess my question here is, how do you see this loosening things up potentially for people so that they can start asking those questions? Like, what are particular moments you want people to connect with in your film?
Oh, I think again, because I'm a parent now, I've got, a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. I think just trying to again walk on I know it sounds simple. I wish I had a more articulate response, but just really trying to walk a mile in someone else's shoes and seeing this through the lens of a parent. It's this idea that everything is going a certain way and a grenade goes off in your lives, like right there in the palm of your hands. What do you do? I mean, there's just pieces of you everywhere. And it's just so traumatic and it's so difficult. And so if you can feel for these families and what they went through, could you possibly understand and start to make the connections of these labels and the rhetoric that's harmful and how that can perpetuate things and translate into violence? And what are you willing to do about it so that, a mother or father don't have to deal with something so awful?
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm hoping that, because there's such a visceral reaction to some of the imagery that we have. And I think that, as Aziza was mentioning, like, this wasn't just, we didn't just showcase this story. We also showed what happened in Buffalo, New York. We also showed a glimpse of what happened in Pittsburgh, and this is all connected. And again, the ripple effects of these hate crimes impact entire communities and beyond. So.
I would say one moment that really stuck out from, or it wasn't one moment, but you're moving between just hearing the family tell their story and watching the interrogation of the shooter, and just watching how the banter, and knowing that that is an ideological unconscious that's happening right there, that whether it was unconscious or not, perhaps for some people it was, for some people it wasn't, but that was what kept the story from being told. And I feel like for me, watching that made me think, where am I doing this in other places in my life? Maybe not so maybe not so overtly, but where is it that I'm not seeing things, just keeping my, yeah. So I think that for me, that's where I see the power is being able to dig in.
And it's all, for some people it's subjective. Even for my co-producer Sean Dash, who, is a white male, grew up in New York and Manhattan. He thought it was good police work. He was like, oh, they're just making him comfortable and making sure he just keeps talking. And this is a strategy. And if you think it's something else, then oh, we need to showcase a bunch of, other confessions and then bring somebody to talk about it. And I said, Sean, trust me on this. If you are a person of color, if you are from a demographic, a minority, you instantly feel that there is bias going on right here, that it wouldn't be this cozy reception, that they would ask tougher questions. They don't even reference the victims' names, not even once. And these aren't quote unquote normal names. I mean, it's Dia Barakat, it's Yusr Abu Salha, it's Razan Abu Salha. And what we didn't show in the film is that religion was on his mind, even in the police car going to the station. He's asking the police officers, where they're from, and he's talking about being in the Bible Belt and how he resents that. And so, a good intelligent detective or officer would start putting some pieces together and oh, the women wore hijabs and their names and so I think what had happened was, they were pleased that he was being so polite and he was easy to work with and cordial and he's kind of giving them all the information. The problem is that the truth is, where did they get this parking dispute narrative from? It's from the killer who literally has blood still on his clothes. So you take his word and you put out a release the next morning without doing zero investigation. I mean, that is why the family members were so appalled. They were so infuriated by that. And you have to be honest about the bias, that transpired. And all you have to do is flip the script. So what if it was a guy named Muhammad who was a Muslim man, a brown man, who killed three white students? How do you think that would have played out? What would that confession have looked like? What would they have done that night? They probably would have rounded up his entire family and interrogated them and, put out some sort of story about this being domestic terrorism immediately. And this is not hard to imagine because we've seen it over and over and over again. And so again, I think there was a boiling point from our community. There was this feeling of like, we're sick of being the punching bag. We are going to get this narrative right. And that is why this is a case study of what happens when a community can rally behind families. And that's exactly what we did.
The quote that really also comes into focus from just this little piece right now in our conversation is the one of the fathers says, we need to identify things the way they are. And it just strikes me that even though things played out and so many, it's like you said, there were clues that you could easily string together. Um, you can't, like, this is a key example of how it was like it was almost like the community was on trial to prove that these individuals were worthy even of further investigation. And I think that's the part that just kind of like grabs at me that they were like Dr. Suzanne names this, like they were actually model citizens. They were trying their best. They were like top in different realms. They were actually just trying to fit in and then one of the dads said he just wanted the kids to belong and that they raised them that way. And yet here they were having to prove something. And so um, but we see this case after case, like all the time, that it's not enough that, things just unfold. You actually have to get in front of the story and you have to tell and describe things that you see. And I can't imagine having to watch a family go through that. And I'm curious, like how did you watch that? And like how did you even cope with it, knowing that, I mean, you've got kids, and yeah, especially as you reflect on your own experience with it.
I mean, you could just imagine because, we went through so many iterations in post-production. There were so many different edits. We, in fact, were trying to do this as a three-part series because we had so much footage. And if you think about it, the film tackles a lot. I mean, it's a true crime story. It's a social issue piece. We're talking about Islamophobia. We're talking about bias in the media. We're talking about hate crimes, how difficult it is to prosecute them, the difference between federal and state hate crimes. So to pack that all in one film was, felt like Mission Impossible. And to have to watch scenes over and over again, like when Dr. Suzanne Bedicat talks about or describes, the preparation for the burial, it's just gut-wrenching. And, there was some things that we omitted that was just so hard for me as a father. Um, there's a scene where they're discussing the cell phone video and Nami, Dia's father, and this eventually got cut, but he talks about, we just need to let it out. We just let's have the video play. Let's get the story out. He's like, and Dr. Abu Salha jumps in and he said, Nami was the only person there, and he actually cleaned up all the blood. Because after the police gathered the evidence, do their thing, there's no cleanup crew. I didn't know that actually. It's all left to the owners of the house, and in this case, it was the victim's parents. And Nabi describes cleaning up the apartment and the pieces of brain and fragments and bullets that he had to throw away and mopping up his own kid. It just was so hard to see. And when I was filming it, you could see the camera shake because I break down. I was like in tears. I had to put the camera down. I had to like try to comfort him and be a human. And then I remembered, oh, I'm a filmmaker. I should actually be capturing this. So yeah, it was really tough. A lot of highs and lows, and I think what a lot of people don't talk about in our industry is our mental health, and it's really difficult. And if you're in the edit bay working on a project like this, you know, you don't just like, "Oh, all right, time for dinner. Everybody put on a smiling face." You're like literally wrestling with violent execution style deaths and the impact on the community and the fact that like hate crimes keep rising. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I was prickly, as my wife would say a lot of the time. And, so I just have to really thank, the people around me and my support group for kind of making sure I was okay and getting through this. But there's no other way to do it. It's just hard.
Yeah, but getting through it, grace with each other, and knowing when you get prickly and giving yourself space and whatever that means. I also want to go back to something you just said about federal hate crimes, because it was really struck me in the film. Uh, and I forget the name of the speaker, but she says that federal hate crimes were created during civil rights because the states weren't prosecuting hate crimes. And so now, in this day, when we're talking about civil rights offices having to close because of budget cuts or whatever, the cuts, not forget the word budget, just the cuts that are being made across the board. Um, I can't, I like, how do you feel like this is going to impact cases like this?
Well, it takes tremendous resources to investigate and to go beyond like I think, there's the evidence, you got the guy like in this case, I mean, he turned himself in, right? So you have the perpetrator, case closed, he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. But if it's not labeled a hate crime, then as a society, we're not aware of things like Islamophobia, of anti-Semitism. Like we just, oh, this is just this terrible thing that happened in Chapel Hill. But without that hate crime declaration, without the official classification of the act, then how do you wrap your hands around a problem that doesn't exist? You could have people on the other side of the aisle saying, "Oh, we don't need to put resources towards hate crime prosecution. Show me the numbers." Oh, they pale in comparison to this other thing that d demands our attention. So I think I don't know. What do you say? I think it's insane that they would cut budgets, or dissolve, entire departments, and it's just a really crazy time, and I hope that it could all be reversed, and we have to double our efforts on the nonprofit side and on the advocacy side. So we gotta roll up our sleeves. Our job is not done.
Right? All hands on deck. So I want to make sure that if you have any questions, please make sure that you're sending them to Michal in the chat as a reminder. Uh, and uh, and so Andrea will be asking some questions as we kind of feed in. Just a reminder to make sure that if you're in the audience, feel free to make sure that you're sending something in the chat.
I just want to add one thing. So, I think many of you will remember the case against the McMichaels in Georgia. There was the young African American man, Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging in the neighborhood and was essentially executed by these guys. Um, I think that case felt like progress because it was similar in the fact that, the on the state level, they had their guys, they had the evidence, they were going to go to jail for a long time, but the federal government jumped in and really put the effort in trying to formalize it as a hate crime. And they did actually prosecute it as a hate crime. And when they were debating this in various legacy media outlets, it kept on, they kept on pushing of like, well, why does this even matter? Right? Like he's going to go to the jail. These guys are going to go to jail for the rest of their lives. And I just remember so vividly, the civil rights attorney said very clearly, because it matters. It matters to see their history and the racism that was displayed within their text message and their group chats and the hate that they promoted and said out loud, whether it was in person or online. So it matters. It matters to our society. It matters to the families. It matters to the victims. It matters to the community. So I felt like maybe in a big way the what transpired in the Chapel Hill murders influenced the federal government to really act and to prosecute it as a hate crime and to be very clear about why it needed to be prosecuted as such.
Thank you. That um, brings up a lot. We've been studying like the brain science around dehumanization as part of our work, and it's given me a lot more compassion to understand what's going on in people's minds when they're in this place of othering, and it's given me sometimes less hope, because I know how hard it is to you can't change someone's mind. They need to change their own mind. Um, and so in these moments where I mean, I could sort of hear it in Dr. Susan was saying, so these are our best. These are our best. And so what? It didn't make a difference. All of these acts, it didn't make a difference. She had that moment. And I think probably most of us are having moments like this right now of we've been working at this or that. And what is it that can give us that hope to move things forward so that we don't get stuck? I think it's natural for us to go there for a moment. What are ways that you see this film as helping us to forge a path forward with resilience? I think what we saw there really was resilience.
Yeah, I think again, we're not going to be the big victims. We're going to advocate for ourselves. We have a community behind us, and it's not just the Muslim community, it's a community of good humans who understood what these families were going through, what the community was going through. And and without accountability, we have nothing. So yeah, I'm going to include the rhetoric that Trump was saying at the time because, he was the leading candidate and eventually became the president. And, some would argue it doesn't matter what a president says, it's about how they govern. And I think that's horseshit, for lack of a better word, because you're the leader of the free world, and it matters, and it could empower others to treat an entire race or community as other or as, beneath you. And, I think Craig Hicks demonstrated that, you know, he didn't even treat them as humans. Like, would you shoot a dog the way that he disposed of Dia Yusin Razan? I don't think so, right? I think there might be like some pause. Like maybe you pull the gun out, maybe you're angry, maybe you put the gun towards the dog and then you back away and actually like think about what you're about to do. But this was cold, calculated murder. He disposed of them like they were subhuman. And so we need to reckon with what transpired. We need to talk about it. We need to hold people accountable. And, I think that there also should be some non-negotiables. Hate speech, um, racist acts in our society should just not be tolerated. And we need to get each other's back and we need to stop it. I know that, it feels like, oh, there should be policies and bills that could be passed to kind of help curb this. But at the end of the day, it's on us. It's on us as a society to love one another, to get each other's back, to step into that uncomfortable space when things might be heating up. But we have to. We can't just like sit idly by. It's not enough to just film it on your phone. I mean, great, document it, but step into that space, protect one another. I think in this case, and this might be a little controversial, you know, he had harassed so many other people in the condominium, and I just feel like there had to be more that could have been done. If he's walking around like some sort of self-deputizing the parking lot and treating people like don't mess with me and brandishing his gun, I feel like that should be reported and you should go to the HOA and you should try to get this guy evicted or at least get it on the police's radar. And I feel like people were operating from a place of fear versus empowerment versus like, hey, I saw what he said to you. That's not cool. I got your back. Let's together, let's go to the HOA or together, let's go to the police. And that just didn't happen. And there was many like the police and talked to 36 neighbors and they all, a lot of them had issues with this guy. Um, and so, why are we waiting for something so awful and so heinous to happen? Like, let's get in front of it.
You're naming the critical importance of standing up and the collective strength and community. And in addition to that clearing call that I just heard, I'm curious, like, what has outside community response been like for the Muslim community in this particular instance, and even in your reception of the film?
I mean, it's had glowing reviews. It's been very impactful. We were accepted to a number of film festivals. I think, we had an incredible DC premiere. And I think people are talking about the need to curb Islamophobia, to have more accountability. So I think it's doing its job, thankfully. I mean, obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, but people can use it as a resource. They could use it as a tool for for those of you who are joining us now. If you were moved by the film, please share it with others. It is available on, Amazon, on Apple TV. I think that, you could host, you don't have to rent out a movie theater to have a community screening. You could literally invite your neighbors over and watch it and talk about it. So I think from the Muslim community, I think that a lot of folks feel heard. A lot of people feel like this was a film that had to be made and had to be told the way that we told it. Um, and I think, they were very supportive, and it's obviously very traumatic and very triggering for our community, but they also know that, it needed to be done this way.
Andrea, did you want to chime in? No.
I
Okay.
was, there was one more, do we have time? Yeah, we have time for another question. Um,
Well,
just a comment. There was a comment. I was surprised that the police chief gave an interview given how poor a job they did. Um, I was wondering about that too. And then they asked the same question that you just answered. How did you, so I'm just going to ask the question, like, how did you get these interviews with people who might have been resistant
Um,
or
you know,
resistance?
you try to be honest, be professional, be patient. And I don't think Chief Blue's a bad person. I think that, it was obviously a bad call. And, from his perspective, he was trying to get information out to the community so that they all didn't feel like, there was some, you know, bigger agenda or, bigger threat. But at the same time, we've all watched enough movies and read enough books to know that, like, what is the common response early on in an investigation? It's no comment. We are still investigating. So I think that's a huge lesson learned. Um, but some interviews were easy to secure in terms of like the power of the community, for instance, like getting Manar Wahid, who worked for the Obama administration and who had intimate knowledge of the case, because we were working with the families and we were trusted by them. Boom, that was an easy connection. Ramana Ahmed, that was another one. Now the celebrity interview, Hassan Minaj, I had to kind of work with some of my close friends with the Muslim Public Awareness, the Hollywood Bureau, and they were able to connect. And it was kind of, you had to jump through hoops and talk to the agent and the manager and the publicist. But eventually we got directly to him, and I was able to do a verbal pitch, and he was kind of down to do the interview. So it all just takes time. And with, Chief Blue in particular, I just told him the exact angle that I was going for, and we wanted to get the truth out there, and we wanted to hear about how chaotic it was in the direct aftermath, and to just get his story for the record. And there was nothing tricky. There was no agenda that I really had. Um, and so, he agreed to it, and I think that we actually really benefit from having his voice in the film.
I appreciate the breakdown of how all that comes together because I think sometimes we forget, not we forget, but the way we are with each other really matters. And the way we push each other also really matters. And so to kind of close us out, if you are there any closing thoughts that you want to make sure that we leave with?
Gosh, I mean, given the organization, it's like the gigantic elephant in the room of what we're going on, and the continued genocide in Gaza, and everything that we're seeing and hearing in the West Bank. I mean, I was just there last year, and you hear about these stories, and it's one thing to hear about it in the news and see what's going on the college campuses, but when I was there, I was really struck by the racism, that exists. And it's not the experience that I've had with my Jewish brothers and sisters growing up, right? Like growing up here in America. I mean, I wouldn't be a filmmaker if it wasn't for the amazing stories that our Jewish brothers and sisters have put out in the past. So it's important that collectively we stand up against the hate, against the racism. We got to call it out. We got to be unapologetic in terms of um, what we're seeing and hearing, and that it's not a true reflection of either demographic. and work together to address it and and be clear about like, hey, if we're trying to advocate as Palestinians, as Muslims for the awful conditions that we're seeing, that we're not labeled as terrorists for saying that or supportive of Hamas. I mean, as a Palestinian, I don't know anybody in my family or friends that are out there supporting Hamas or any other terrorist organization. So it's really unfortunate that we continue to get these labels and the bias in the media perpetuates. It's still today, every single day, and it's just so aggravating and it's just absolute nonsense. And so what I love about this moment is seeing the organizations like your organization and Jewish Voice for Peace and having our Jewish brothers and sisters really stand up in the most profound ways ever before and say enough's enough and we have to stop this madness. And it's just been so amazing and when you feel like you're the punching bag for so long to have that kind of support and solidarity, it's amazing, and I think that we just need to continue and thank you so much for everything you all do.
Thank you for being with us. And yeah, we will go into the hard and important things that need to be named because we've got to be able to go through it together. And we might have a really hard time getting through it, but if we are willing to show up time and time again through the despair, through the anger, through the frustration, then I think that's the only thing that really gives me hope right now. Otherwise, the there's too much. It's too overwhelming, and we need to be able to know that we can be there with each other, even and especially when we're having a hard time through it. So thank you so much for being with us. For those who would love to stay on, or actually before you sign off, we have one request. Michal's about to send a link in the survey, sorry, in the chat. That is a survey. We would love your feedback both on today's program and we want to receive ideas for future programming and the kind of topics that you want to hear from and to be part of and to dive into more deeply. So even if you don't stay for the breakout rooms, please take a moment to complete the survey. We take them very seriously. And we take it into account in like how we create future programs. And if you enjoyed any part of this program, we hope that you'll also consider a donation to NewGround. And so Michal will also be adding that link into your chat. And so with that, I am so grateful for all of your time. And Michal is about to send you into breakout rooms, and you'll be with a facilitator for the next 30 minutes, and they'll close out from those breakout rooms. The whole intention behind those rooms is it's a place for us to dig in more deeply, to name the things that we appreciated, that resonated, and that we completely disagreed with, but that it's a place for us to process more fully instead of letting things just stay bottled up. So we hope that you'll join us in those breakout rooms. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Tarek.
you. Salam, shalom.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.